Okay, so I got to tell the story in video form because it's too much to type, but it's like it's a crazy story. I went to set today. I was working today, and of course on set, I don't know everybody there. And this lady comes up to me and she asks me about my wife, and I'm like, yeah, I have a wife, and she's like, because I don't want to deal with trying to explain it all or whatever. Yeah, I have a wife. Whatever. Move on, right? So then she asks me, oh, okay, well, what's her name? I need a name for emergency contact. Oh, shit. Now I'm caught in a lie, right? So I'm like, okay, Rihanna. That's the first thing that popped into my head, right? And she's like, oh, okay. Same last name? I'm like, yeah, Rihanna Manson. Oh, okay. She says, what's her phone number? Oh, Christ, now I got to come up with a number. Well, I can't give her Scott's number because if Scott heaven forbid, gets a phone call for an emergency and they ask for Rihanna, he's just going to hang up on them, right? So I'm like, okay, whatever. 250-555-1234. And she kind of looks at me strange. I'm like, oh, no, really, that's her number, So now I was like, okay, so now I have a wife and her name's Rihanna and the phone number I gave is like your standard phone number from any movie, So she's kind of, giving me this funny look. And for whatever reason, it carried on, right? And she's just sort of making conversation. She's like, oh, how long have you been married? And I'm like, 3 years or so, I'm just making stuff up or whatever. Oh, she's, oh, that's really nice, and I'm like, yeah, she's really hot. I don't even know why I said that, because that was like the beginning of the spiral down the rabbit hole at that point, right? Because there's other people in the room and they're listening in, right? And I'm like, fuck. So this guy, after like I finished this conversation with her or whatever, right, and contact information and that, this random guy comes out to me and asks me, oh, I heard you had a hot wife. He's like, do you have a photo of her? Like, who does that? Yeah, let me give you a photo of my hot wife, right? So, well, I do, right? Well, I don't have a photo of my hot wife because I don't have a hot wife. I don't have a wife, whatever, right? So I jump on, like, I'm hiding my phone, from him, and I'm going on Google, and I'm like, well, what do I look for? Well, I can't look for Rihanna. That's too obvious, right? So I'm like, what do I type in? So I just, on the fly, I think to myself, okay, soft porn star. I look up or whatever, and all these, women come up and, clothed, and I'm like, okay, so I'll use one of these. And I just grab a random one, I download it to make it look like it's in my images, and I said to him, oh, there it is, So I show him the picture or whatever, and he's like, oh, yeah, she is hot. She's really young, eh? And I'm like, oh, yeah. And then think about, like, age or whatever, right? So, and I'm like, yeah, and I said, like, yeah, I had to, rescue her from another country. And he's like, oh, okay. And he's like, from where? I'm like, and I'm really going down the rabbit hole here. I'm like, the Philippines. And he's like, oh. And I'm thinking, what's his matter, right? And he's just like, well, she's Latino. And I look at the photo and I'm like, oh, crap, she is Latino. And I said Philippines. I'm like, what the hell's going on? And I'm like, yeah, she was sold into sex slavery in the Philippines, and I had to rescue her from there. And I'm like, oh my God. So now I have a wife, apparently a hot wife, that's named Rihanna Manson, has a phone number from, the movies. And I'm trying to keep, track of all this, that is Latino, that I rescued from, sex slavery in the Philippines, that's half my age or whatever. And I'm like, this is just going down the rabbit hole fast, And now, other people are piquing interest in my story, about rescuing this girl, and, so then they start asking me more details, like, well, what happened? How did this happen? La, 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 like this, right? I'm like, oh my God, like I've really cornered myself in this like web of lies within like 5 minutes. I'm like, how the hell am I going to get out of this? Anyways, I guess you can see the moral of the story. It's pretty obvious, right? And the moral of the story is, don't believe everything you read on Facebook, because this never happened.